Hi, everyone. I am Amy Zellmer from Faces of TBI, and welcome back to the Brain Health Online Summit Training Series. I myself am a survivor from a fall on the ice in 2014, and myself, along with Dr. Jeremy Schmo from Minnesota Functional Neurology, we saw a need in the brain injury community for more training and education on alternative healthcare methods and modalities for those of us still suffering from the lingering effects of a brain injury. So our goal with this summit is to help educate and bring awareness to this invisible injury that affects 2.8 million Americans each year and is the leading cause of death and disability in the world. So each day you're going to be hearing from 4 to 5 speakers, and they're going to be sharing their experience either working with a brain injury patient or their real life experience of living with a brain injury. So today I am here with David Grant, and David is the founder of the TBI Hope Network. The network includes multiple social platforms, including one of the world's largest Facebook groups supporting the brain injury community. David is also the publisher of TBI Hope Magazine, a monthly print and digital publication serving the brain injury community. David is a member of the Brain Injury Association in New Hampshire and BEST Board of Directors, and is a staff writer for brainline.org. He has authored several books and numerous publications about life after brain injury. When he's not in front of his computer, David can be found cycling the back roads of southern New Hampshire. So welcome to the summit, David. I'm so happy to have you here.
Amy, thank you so much for having me here today, and thank you for all you're doing to increase awareness of traumatic brain injury. You're doing an amazing job.
Thank you, and likewise. So you are definitely a mover and a shaker, and you are getting the word out as much as you can about brain injuries. So
if you spot it, you got it.
We're in it together.
Yep.
So David, why don't you start out by sharing your story with everyone of how you've come here?
Yeah, it's it's funny, but I just penned a new piece for Brainline. It's going to be published in early June, and the title of the piece is "From There to Here." And I gave some thought the other day to how my wife Sarah and I, how our lives have evolved over the last few years. And I thought back to where we were at the very beginning and thought, how did we ever get here from there? And, to kind of go back a little bit, in 2010, I was out cycling. I'm an endurance cyclist. It was November 11th. And there's always two versions to every story. There's the plan, and then there's what happens. And the day of your fall, you didn't plan on your day unfolding the way that it did. It just, some things you never see coming. I was out on a very familiar road, and a 16-year-old driver and I met by accident. He T-boned me. I flew about 50 feet in the air. I was knocked unconscious. I was fortunate enough to have my accident about 50 feet from the Main Street fire station, maybe a little further than that, and I sustained a traumatic brain injury. Usually when I share, I get into a little more depth about the accident, a trip to the trauma center, and a lot of the emotion around that. But as time passes, I found that to be increasingly difficult. And part of it is, in addition to my traumatic brain injury, I also live with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
And when I go back to that space, because if I want to, I can go back and relive it in absolutely vivid detail. And I do that very often when I speak publicly to help bring the attendees back to that point of what happened in my life and the emotion that swirled around it, the fear of my own mortality.
Yeah.
But I think in the spirit of keeping it light today and keeping it forward moving, the elevator version is that I got hit by a car. I sustained a traumatic brain injury. I made it through those abysmally tough first 2 years. I fondly call that TBI boot camp. And you've been there.
Yeah.
You know, how do you reconcile that your life is gone as you knew it? How do you come to the point where you can say, I fought for years to rebuild my life, to the point where I could say I have the life that I used to have. And as a brain injury survivor, and you know it better than most, it's futile. You can never go back, but it's part of the process. So I fought very hard for a couple of years to try and say, okay, I want to be that David who used to be. And I realized at some point, probably in year 3, that every bit of energy that I put into trying to recapture the past prevented me from living meaningfully in the moment, and also prevented me from serving others with the message that recovery from brain injury may not look on the surface like recovery from other conditions, but you can hit a point in your stride where you can develop a life that's worthwhile. That's the elevator version.
At what point did you start becoming an advocate? But the first year or two was probably focused on recovery. And then at what point, what kind of brought you to all the advocacy work that you're doing?
That's a good question. I think I would probably be defined as an accidental advocate.
Aren't we all?
Oh my God, this by circumstance, not virtue, I started writing during my first year, and what I was doing was journaling. I was trying to make sense of what makes no sense. And as I started writing, at some point I realized I may be laying the foundation for a book.
Mm-hmm.
One of the early reviewers of my book commented that she never read a book that was as insightful about day-to-day life with a traumatic brain injury. And I think part of why my voice is as authentic as it is in my first book is I wrote about things that were happening not from a future perspective looking back. The days that I contemplated suicide, where life was really dark and made no sense at all, and I was unable to envision life beyond that darkness, I wrote about it in that space. So I initially started with a series of what would be journal entries. And at some point, at about a year, I went, this could be cobbled together in a book form. I put Metamorphosis, Surviving Brain Injury out on Amazon. And the feedback was humbling. I had a lot of folks that, and as an advocate, and I laud you for all you do, as an advocate, the thing that drives people like me and you is when you hear the words, I thought I was alone in this.
Yeah.
And when you know that you are part of ending somebody's isolation, it strikes a chord that's almost, when you try and put it into words, you dishonor it. And there's a sense of, this is what I'm supposed to do. So the book came first. And again, the intent wasn't to write a book. I started blogging. And blogging again, Barbara Stahora, who I think you are familiar with, is a very big advocate of journaling as a pathway to wellness. And by writing, it helped me make sense of things. So I put a lot of information out there on my blog. And actually, I got an email 2 weeks ago, healthline.org, just named my blog for the second year in a row the best traumatic brain injury blog. And I'm like, oh my God, you write about suicide, you write about, the things that are heart-wrenching, and people say, nice job, and it's just odd, but it's wonderful and it's validating. So I started continuing the blogging, and that got the attention of Brainline. And Brainline reached out to me and said, would you be willing to work on a volunteer basis and contribute regularly as a Brainline staff blogger, which gave me a larger platform. And it kind of, trickled up from there. Again, never the intent, but when I'm asked to do something, if it serves the greater good and it helps end the silence for those that are impacted by brain injury, it helps family members to better understand what their loved ones are going through, if it helps members of the medical and professional community to say, wow, I've got more of an insight than I would have had otherwise. You know what? In for a penny, in for a pound. I'm going to do it, as you do.
And you also hit on something just a second ago. You said that you work for Brainline on a volunteer basis. Mm-hmm. And most of what we do as advocates is unpaid. It is, we do it because we're passionate about it, and we want to get our message out and help like you just said, help other survivors, medical professionals, caregivers.
Well, you know what's nice about that is I'd say probably 80% of the advocacy work that both my wife Sarah and I do is non-compensatory.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is there's that saying, whoever pays the piper calls the tune. And I don't, when I'm out there sharing, and my wife and I made a recent trip to Canada. We were invited to come up and present at Brain Injury Canada annual conference, and they were very kind, and they had no budget. Mm-hmm. And you sit back and say, okay, we're going to eat no matter where we are. Yeah. Canada's only a 6-hour drive, so it's a tank of gas. And as my wife and I talked it through, the realization that we came to was if we can help one person, then it's worth it. Then the world is a better place for us doing it. And that's the way it has to be.
And you talk about how if you just help one person. Yeah. And when I was in March, spoke at the Richmond, Virginia Brain Injury Conference. Mm-hmm. And I had a handful of people come up that thanked me for writing and thanked me for starting my TBI tribe on Facebook. And it's so like powerful. These people you don't even know, and you've affected their life.
Well, here's the piece that's wonderful. How far out are you?
3 years.
Yeah, I'm going to hit 7 years this year. And back in 2010, 2011, there really was no national narrative. There really wasn't a thriving social community. Brain injury was kind of underneath the covers. It wasn't talked about a whole lot. And in my short tenure as being a brain injury survivor, there's been a huge uptick in the mainstream media narrative and spotlight focusing on brain injury. Case in point, last night, the night prior to today's recording, Tom Brady's wife came out and said, yeah, Tom Brady has sustained concussions. Yeah. It's becoming, you can't put on the news for a week and not see it. And the piece that's really wonderful, and I've seen it in my tenure within the brain injury community, is the growth of online support communities. Mm-hmm. And, they're like people, they all have their own personalities. Some are a little more forgiving and caring than others. They help people. And just this past week at our local support group, the member sitting next to me was talking up your TBI tribe. Aww. And she said, I'm a member of Amy's tribe, and we chit-chatted a little bit, and you never know who you're going to help. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's, one of the pieces that I've shared over the years is, nobody asks for brain injury. That line that a lot of us have heard, brain injury is the last thing you think about until it's the only thing you think about.
Yeah.
But this is the best time, I think, in the history of ever to be a brain injury survivor. It's a really exciting time. There are new technologies, there are new protocols, there are new social communities. We can be part of something bigger in a way that 5 or 10 years ago we couldn't be.
Yeah. And social media, well, just the internet in general, mm-hmm. Can really bring us together, like we're doing this over the internet. You couldn't do this 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Folks would be like, traumatic brain what?
Exactly. I had never heard of it. I did not know that term. Mm-hmm. I was originally diagnosed as severe concussion. Mm-hmm. And then in a few weeks when my symptoms weren't subsiding, they're like, oh yeah, this is a traumatic brain injury. And I was like, what's that?
I was actually a year out before anybody used the term traumatic brain injury in my case. Initially I was told the day after my accident that I dodged a bullet, given a high five and sent on my way. I had an incident that would have been November. In January of the following year, 2 months later, I abruptly lost the ability to read. So I was back to the neurologist, and he said, well, it's pretty clear you've got a concussion. It's probably a mild one. And he gave me roughly a 12-month window. And my question at the time is, when am I going to be normal again? Because I knew that things were vastly different. So at that time, I was told mild concussion, 12 months. March of the following year, which would have been 5 months later, I had my first post-traumatic amnesia, where I lost about 2 hours of time. It just disappeared. Back to the neurologist again and was told I had a severe concussion. I was diagnosed with PTSD. And at that time, I was told 5 years. 5 years, you'll be absolutely normal again. And like I like to share, normal is a setting on a washing machine.
Yeah.
It's not normal. None of this
Yeah.
is really normal. And but it is what it is. And I carried a little bit of anger and a little bitterness early on for the docs that did what they shared what they did. But I think all of us should be given at least one mulligan if our intent is pure. They did the best they could with the information that they had, and if it is what it is. And again, it's one of my life philosophies is if I let myself get angry, bitter, or resentful, I don't grow. I wallow in that, and that's not a comfortable reality.
Absolutely. And, especially 7 years ago, doctors just didn't know. And you
a lot of them still don't
blame them. Right. I agree. But there's more awareness now where if your doctor doesn't tell you, you yourself may figure it out. Where 7 years ago, you wouldn't have probably even figured it out on your own.
One of the best lines that I heard, it was at a conference earlier this year, and the woman who shared said she asked her doctor, "How far, will I get over this?" And he said, and I found it to be both humbling and probably the best answer I've ever heard. He said, "I don't know how well you're going to get, but together, you and I will go forward as far as we can with this." And you know what? There's humility from the doctor, the recognition that, every recovery is different. And also the strong statement that I will remain by your side and we'll do the best we can.
That's a great doctor.
Yep.
And I think just having that positive attitude yourself, and you talked about anger and bitterness, and I definitely was there that first year, and friends and family walked away, and it was very lonely, and I went down that dark hole, and finally I was like, stop it, Amy. Like, I was a very positive thinker before my injury, and I'm like, what are you doing? You know what to do here. You know what you're supposed to do to get yourself out of this.
Yeah.
And so I put my big girl pants on and, was like, okay, I am going to get better. And, that's when I started writing and started my Facebook group, and, it kind of just blossomed from there. But, it is challenging when you meet someone who's still stuck in that dark, negative space, because it's really hard to help someone who's in that space.
There's a philosophy that I try and apply to that too. A friend of mine says, you take no credit and you accept no blame. And what we try to do, and you do it as well as I, is you present solutions to folks. Here are some of the things that have worked for me. And you hope that they're willing to grab those solutions. And a lot of them aren't. The piece that's interesting about brain injury, I also broke an arm when I was hit, and the orthopedist nailed it the next day after they put the permanent cast on. He said, your cast comes off in 3 months, you'll be in pain for 6 months, and then you'll be over it. And 6 months to the day, the pain was gone. It was amazing. But brain injuries are complicated.
Yeah.
That if you've seen one brain injury, you've seen one brain injury. You can't really realistically predict outcomes. What works for me in my recovery may not work for you, and vice versa. And it's very complicated. So, we're going to give the entire medical community a giant mulligan as well, because it's an injury like no other.
Yeah. No two injuries are the same, no two recoveries, and no two treatment plans are the same.
Yeah. I tell folks that I'm back on a bike doing 20 miles a day, and they look at me like I'm crazy.
That's amazing.
Yeah, how do you do that? And for the first the piece that I marvel at is I'm still seeing, and this is for anybody watching that thinks that they may be as good as they're ever going to get, I'm still seeing substantial gains. My breakthrough year was year 3. This past year has been another breakthrough year. And some things, Amy, you just can't make up. For the first 3 years, I'm working about 3/4 time now. Full-time work has eluded me. But for the first 2 or 3 years, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the cognitive wariness I just crashed.
Yep.
And I would be incapable of having conversations. Aphasia would kick in, word-finding challenges. Us brain injured people say the darndest things. And I can now work beyond 2 o'clock. I can field a call from a client at 5. And things like that you can't make up. You can't, fake it until you make it. You can't make that up. You're either capable of having a 5 o'clock conversation or you're not. So knowing that substantial gains have come years out, I take a look at where I'm at today and say, okay, suddenly the future isn't dark and despairing. I sit back anticipatory saying, I wonder what's coming next. What might I be capable of doing?
Yeah, and I was about 2.5 years out when I started seeing gains. And I'm still, I would only say I'm maybe 80% right now. I'm still not back at 100%, but I can feel, I have some really good days where I almost catch a glimpse of the normal. But then, I have really bad days, and you learn kind of how to predict, like if I do this today, I'm going to be out for 2 days. Right. And so you kind of learn how to balance it. And sometimes you don't get it right.
And sometimes it's unpredictable too. Yeah. You can work hard and feel okay the next day, or you can work hard and be down for a week.
Yeah.
I think part of it is learning to coexist with brain injury. And, I've got some limitations. I still fight with trying to live my life like I used to. And, I'll go, full on high speed, just trying to be who I used to be, and then crash just horribly. And, some days I sit back and say, maybe I'll learn, and then I do it again. But it's all part of the process. Go ahead.
Nope, you go ahead.
The piece that I like is I've had the opportunity over the last few years to talk to a lot of folks that are what I fondly call TBI old timers. 12, 13, 16, 20, Jeff Siebel, 40 years. And I had a conversation last year with a gentleman. He said, oh my goodness, he's not producing a film. And he said, 16 years was my 16 years was my breakthrough year. That was a huge game changer. And like a lot of folks may look at that through the prism of being a bit discouraged, saying that's a long time. But just knowing that change on the long term is probably part of the roadmap makes, when the current day reality is tough, it makes it a little bearable, because I can honestly say to myself, I am not today who I was last year. Last year I wasn't who I was at a year out, thank you God. And what's the future going to be? Because in 2 or 3 years I won't be the same David that I am today.
So David, can you talk a little bit about, you have a magazine that you started, and I'm not sure how many years you've been doing it, but if you can tell us a little bit of how that came to be.
Yeah, that's actually been the crown jewel of a lot of the advocacy work that we do. And there are so many things that have had unexpected results where you look back and say, I never saw that coming. And you've had a lot of those moments too. I can say that with absolute certainty. And years and years ago, I wrote as a staff writer for Brain Injury Journey magazine, produced by Lash and Associates. Great people, great magazine. After a couple of years, they decided to cease publication. And my wife, Sarah, and I had always wanted to put a digital publication out there. And I'm kind of always take the high road kind of guy, and I didn't want there to be any conflict of interest. So when Brain Injury Journey magazine folded, we seized that as our moment to jump into producing a monthly magazine. We're now, the issue that I'm working on now is our 27th consecutive month. So we're well into our 3rd year.
Oh, that's great.
And like a lot of survivors, I lost 80% of my income after the accident. I can't do what I used to do, and lives get smallified. You do less, you learn to be more and do more. And it's not so much about what you own or what you spend, it's about life experiences that very often don't cost you a cent. And we started to put it out as a digital magazine, TBI Hope Magazine. And that whole process was a blast. And just like the feedback that I got from speaking in different venues and a lot of my blogging, I had a lot of folks that would reach back to us and say, wow, we are so grateful for you putting this out there. I see so much of myself. And again, the words that folks like you and I like to hear, oh my goodness, I'm no longer alone. And the other piece that came in real early on was folks asked for it in a print format. As brain injury survivors, we've got a very unique set of challenges.
Right.
Bright light, you can't see it here, but I'm under lights for the video quality. Bright lights over a long time are just abysmal. They're not fun to be around. There's that overstimulation being outside with a lot of noise and activity around a lot of people. Within the literary realm, trying to read an online publication means you can't put it down, dog ear it, and then come back to it in a day or two. You can't make notes in the margin. There were challenges, and we had a lot of readers say, "Can you do it in print?" And we looked around for about 2 years looking for a mechanism for print, and really didn't find one that fit. And through an odd circumstance earlier this year, as I produced a children's book and got the advanced copy in an 8.5 by 11 format, the advanced copy showed up here, and my wife and I, Sarah, looked at it and went, the light bulbs went on both of our heads and went, here's our magazine. And we started soft launch in March of this year, kind of testing proof of concept and also fine tuning the physical format. And in April, we released TBI Hope Magazine in print. And what we're doing is we will always have a digital version for free. And it's not a case of saying, okay, we're going to give you a cheap version for free, hoping that you purchase the print version, because that's just cheesy and it's wrong. So the full magazine will always be free in digital format. But because of so many readers who have said we'd like it in print, I conveniently have a copy of last month's issue. This is the May issue of TBI Hope Magazine. We're full color throughout. We run about 35 pages. And what we did is we've opted to use Amazon as our distribution partner. So folks that go to tbihopemagazine.com can sign up for our email list. And once a month, we send an email out. And within that email, recipients have two choices. Click here if you'd like to download the free copy. And again, that will never change. And for those that want to purchase a copy to read, click here to buy it on Amazon. So it's not a true subscription model where you've got to pay upfront. You basically, it's a la carte. If you'd like to buy an issue, you can. And if you want to read it digitally, you can. So yeah, it's been pretty amazing. Yeah, the other piece that's been really fun is we expected readers to really have their spirits bolstered by putting the publication out there. We never saw this coming, was what it would do for our contributing authors.
Yeah.
In the book that you produced. It's just, that's been like the coolest part of the whole journey. Authors contribute, they're published, and we see it more now in print than we did with the digital version. I saw somebody post the other day, look kids, Grammy's been published, and she had a picture of the magazine. And for the individual writers, all of a sudden their previously horrific experiences now have value as they see that these can go out there and help others. So to watch the community spirit of the writers lifted has been nothing short of amazing.
Yeah, when I did my anthology, I have 87 contributing authors. Mm-hmm. For some of them, it was their first time ever writing their story.
Yeah.
And you get it. It's so therapeutic to write it, and you kind of are literally getting it out of your head and onto paper.
Yeah.
And so it's, I think your magazine really offers an outlet for people who do want to share their story.
Well, the piece that's been exciting is once it's been again another one that we never saw coming. We're getting a lot of interest from agencies that serve the brain injury community. We got one last week from, oh my goodness, where was it? Somewhere, I just lost it entirely. New Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a support group facilitator who said, our members are now asking our organization to bring the magazine to the brain injury survivors in our support group. So we're seeing kind of a bottom-up push for the magazine to be used like that. And we're offering discounted pricing to organizations that want to bring it in-house. So it's been another interesting and just fascinating and unexpected part of the journey, and to know that the work that the other writers, because all we do, we're aggregating it. It's the writers that really shine. We kind of put together the pieces to the puzzle, but it's the contributing writers that pour their souls out in the magazine that are helping to lift humanity higher by being willing to share what is often misunderstood and immensely personal and painful.
Yeah, and I've spoken at a lot of support groups, throughout the U.S., and I see your website listed on many of their websites to subscribe to your magazine.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it really is. And that's what advocacy is all about, helping each other and supporting one another in their journey.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I will have the information below this video too for anyone that does want to subscribe to your digital or print version. And you are also going to give away a copy of your book, right? To one of our Summit listeners.
Yeah, I think we've decided it's going to go to a random Summit listener. And this copy right here is the one that will be signed and sent off to whomever the lucky winner is. And my first book, Metamorphosis, this is basically occasionally I go back and reread my own book. And part of the reason that I do it is 2011 is essentially a one-year blackout. I don't remember much of the entire year. And occasionally I'll go through and read just to remember some of the things that happened. The person that wrote that book isn't the person that's here today because of just personal growth and things that have changed. But if you're a brain injury survivor or family member, caregiver, you'll be able to easily connect the dots with your own life experience.
Yeah, I feel every once in a while, one of my Huffington Post pieces will pop up again and I'll see it circulating. I might have written it a year or two ago and I'll go read it and I'll be like, gosh, that was good, wasn't it? Like, I forget what you wrote because
it's funny. I
part of your journey at the time.
One of the challenges with looking normal is that there are expectations. Also, folks expect that you don't have the challenges that you do. I look the same as I did. I sound the same as I did. It's been a bad day, and I maybe have some vertigo issues or speech challenges. I contribute a piece once a month to Brainline. We talked about that, and it's contributed 2 or 3 weeks in advance of when they publish. They publish the first Monday of every month, and pretty consistently by the time the first Monday rolls around, we'll keep this just for attendees at the summit. This will be like all of our little secret. When it's first Monday, I'll excitedly head over to Brainline, and my first thought is always the same. I wonder what I wrote about. I'll write about something that's happening at the time, and then once it's on paper, I promptly forget. And so it adds an element of excitement. And the other piece is I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of folks in the last few years. And having one of my biggest frustrations is my ongoing memory challenge. And very often I'll meet somebody for the first time 3 or 4 times over.
Yeah.
And if they're familiar with brain injury, they get it. And if they're not, they kind of look at me a little bit askew. But I've learned to laugh at it. I've got a traumatic brain injury, and we may do this again next week too. You never know. So.
I recently was out to lunch with another brain injury friend, and the waitress had interrupted our conversation. She took our order and she walked away, and she looks at me, she's like, what were we talking about? I'm like, how am I supposed to remember? It was hilarious. Neither one of us could remember.
You're too young for a senior moment.
Exactly. Yeah, people the challenges are real, and like you said, when you can walk and talk and you look normal, people just don't understand the invisible struggles like memory and aphasia and, just fatigue. The fatigue's the hardest one for me.
Yeah. But rest assured, the work that you and Jeremy are doing with the summit will change lives. There's just no way that can't come to pass.
Yeah, we're very excited for the summit, and I hope everyone who is watching is, if you get that one golden nugget, it was worth your time to watch these videos. So, any final thoughts, any parting words that you would like to leave our listeners with?
Actually, two. The first one is expectations as far as how they relate to time. I was told that a year out to cash in the chips, this is by a member of the medical community, that I had reached the end of my recovery. It was discouraging. It was his professional opinion, and it was wrong. So I look at time a little bit differently today. Time is no longer my enemy. Days are not to be endured. The passage of time as a brain injury survivor is my friend, because every day, week, month, and year that goes by, neuroplasticity continues to work its magic, and I will continue to see meaningful gains. So there's piece number one, time is your friend. And piece number two has to do with the folks that you surround yourself with. Years ago, my dad said, he's just a great New Hampshire Yankee guy, old timer. I love him to death. And he said, be careful who you associate with because you'll be judged by the company you keep. Mm-hmm. And I found that in the world at large, whether you're a survivor or not, you have folks that you can help lift up and will help lift you up. And together you get to a place where you wouldn't be alone. Yeah. And there are others that are out there that may not have your best interests at heart and may be mired in negativity or challenges. And we all have our own personal journey. That may be their journey. But I found that I've got a smaller circle now than I have ever had. But they're people who have my best interest at heart. So I would suggest that take a good look around the folks that are close to you. And if they have your best interests at heart and they're part of your inner circle, cherish those relationships. And if you got folks that don't support you, don't be afraid to cut the cord. And it may sound harsh, but life isn't a dress rehearsal. You know, we've got a limited amount of heartbeats, and I would rather cherish life than wallow in pain and negativity. And by following my own advice, if I fast forward to where I'm at today, from there to here, I've got a pretty good life. I've got good friends, I've got a wife who loves me. I've got, for the first time ever, a sense of true purpose and a love for humanity that I don't think I would have had otherwise. Thank you for having me as part of the summit, Amy. It's been an honor.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Mm-hmm. And I want to add on to what you were just saying about surrounding yourself with people and cutting loose people who may not have your best intentions at heart. And, you know, I lost a lot of really good friends. Mm-hmm. But I also want to add, be there for them if they come back. Because the circle of brain injury, I've had several people come back into my life because either they had a brain injury or concussion or a loved one did. Yeah. And they came full circle back to me. And so be willing to let them back in your life.
Yeah, and which is another one of my life mantras, be unkind to no one.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Well, David, thank you so much. This has been great. And like I said, I will have his information under this video if you are interested in his magazine, which I highly suggest. I read it every single month, whether I contribute or not that month. I enjoy reading it. So thank you for all that you do for the community, David.
Okay, back at you, Amy. Thank you again.
And thank you, everyone, for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. And just remember that you are not alone in brain injury. So thank you, everyone, for watching. And thank you again, David.